So hi David, thanks for being with us today. It's great to see you again, and we are going to be discussing all things neurodiversity and your amazing creation, Nook Pods. So David, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Nook Pods, and what kind of led you to creating Nook Pods?
Sure. So yeah, hi Emma, great to be here, and thanks very much for today and taking the opportunity to chat with me. So I'm David 𝐸. I'm the founder and director, and any other title you want to make up of Nook, which I created back in 2015. Off the back of, I'm a product designer, so for many years, for many decades, I'm sorry to say, I have to admit, I've been providing design services to third parties, or as an in-house, design consultant or department manager or whatever it's been. And so in 2011, having built a previous company and sold it, I ended up working for an organization, having previously been a director of 25 people in a small factory. I went then to work for the company that bought us, that had 170,000 people and a $26 billion turnover, which was just, mind-boggling. But what was really interesting about the period I spent with those guys that led to the creation of Nook was I got the opportunity to see offices, to see workspace and the state of workspace. And I came to the conclusion very quickly, and I'd been really excited at the start of this journey, thinking, I can't wait to see some of the great things that we're doing out there, and I want to take those lessons and bring them forward. I was left dejected, frankly. I mean, it's in a toxic state, and I mean that in particular with regards to people who aren't extroverts all the time, right? Which is everybody. We can't all be extroverts all the time, right? So these spaces, it came to my, attention, or my conclusion was, have been kind of designed by and for the noisy, right? And I'm fed up with it, Emma. I'm like even more fed up with it now. Like, now that sort of 5-6 years in, 7, oh my gosh, nearly 7 years in. And we're battling this tide, but I think the tide is changing. So that's what Nook was all about. It was all about creating a little antidote to this, extraordinarily sensory sort of overload inducing extrovert coddling space that was just didn't cater at all for and at the time I didn't know anything about neurodiversity. I'd never heard the expression. In fact, it's fairly new to me even still, but I knew that the noisy majority, as they can sometimes be called, it's wrong. It's not a majority. It's just that the loudest, what is it they say? The squeakiest wheel gets the oil, right? So I knew that we were designing very much kind of for avatars of the kind of designers themselves, or for the squeakiest wheel. And I just wanted to create an ingredient, basically, a little ingredient that would be a bit of an antidote and a little bit of a refuge, a sanctuary, where we've become, as our cubicles have been taken away and our offices have been taken away and we're put out into the prairie, into the pasture, we've lost a sense of home and a sense of grounding, a sense of belonging. So it was really about, I knew I wasn't going to make, a pod for everybody, but it's about having that touchdown space to be able to go, because 15 minutes, a half an hour of recharge, of reset, can be really powerful to help offset some of that that you get in the workspace. So that's where it comes from, and that's kind of where the idea behind them.
That's incredible, and I can really see the benefit of, if I was in an office, well, back in the day when we went to offices, if I was going into the office back then, I think I would have really benefited from just being able to have that breakout time, being able to go and sit somewhere quietly, and I suppose being able to be somewhere where you didn't necessarily have to perform, because it was interesting that you mentioned about the noisiest. So I think a lot of people just feel like that's how they should perform in the workplace as well. So having that space where it's kind of really clear to everyone around you is, I'm in this space, I'm working, I need some downtime. possibly then prevents people then trying to interact with you. So from kind of your point of view, what do you think the benefits that businesses and community spaces might feel, probably more businesses might feel, if they were to have Nook Pods?
Yeah, businesses, schools, hospitals now we see, libraries, really big uptake recently, community spaces in the sense of co-working, sports stadia are all sort of, getting on board with this kind of idea. And the reason behind that is that I think it does a couple of things. The first one is it helps to, first of all, provide choice. Choice is at the core kind of inclusivity, and you can't have choice if there aren't options, right? So it's another option. It's an option. It's an option that's different from sitting out in among everybody else and sitting with your back to everything which is going on and feeling in the spotlight, and like you said, feeling like you can take a step out of the spotlight. So it has a very personal benefit for the individual. It also does what you said, what you alluded to there as well. It's a permission signaler.
Yeah, what it does is, that's a really good phrase to use, a permission signaler. Yeah.
Right? And that's for two, let's say, bodies of people. It's for the user.
Yeah.
But it also signals, in a way, on behalf of the organization. Mm-hmm. We've considered this, and we're catering, and we're inclusive, and we understand that different types of brains are working on different tasks. I mean, I'm a completely different brain from one moment to the next working on a creative task compared to an administrative task, right? I mean, I flip, I mean, the hair on the back of my neck stands up and everything changes if my task goes from creative way to administrative, or having to pick up the phone and call somebody, especially out in the open space. So it's doing that sort of signaling thing as well. So it's very personally useful. It also has a value in terms of not just avoiding potential meltdown, or at least if not meltdown, then stress, which can impede performance, productivity, etc. But it can also be a place where if you've had some sort of event, neural event, whatever it might be, it's a place where you can come and you can reset. Yeah. And because of that connection, because of that signaling thing, people then tend to go, where's Emma? Oh, she's in the Nook. I'll catch her when she comes out. You haven't had to put up a red flag and say, leave me alone. And you're still available. People can still reach you, So it does that. And then not only that, but one of the key elements too about it, and that was sort of cornerstone to the development of it, was it's hyper flexible. It's hackable. It's modular. It's changeable. So it's a low risk investment. So when you put it into a space, if it doesn't work straight away, change it. Move it around, modify it. If you're moving, take it with you. If you're expanding, get more. And if eventually you don't need it anymore for whatever reason, sell it on, sell it back to us. We can refresh them. We can, bring them on to, a new life, whether that's with a new customer or with a customer that can't maybe afford a new product or a charity or something like that. So it has all of these multiple benefits. I'm trying to compact them into a short answer. Sorry, Emma.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the things you touched on, so I think because we're obviously talking about neurodiversity today, but one of the things we talk about when we're talking to employers is inclusive design, universal design, and actually by making kind of accessibility changes, it actually benefits all. So whilst Nook Pods and that space is great for neurodiversity, you didn't design it with neurodiversity in mind. So actually it's brilliant for the entire team, the entire workforce. So it doesn't have to. So if a person hadn't disclosed and their colleagues didn't know about it, it's also not, if you're using that, people don't think, oh, well, that person must be autistic, that person must have ADHD, because actually everybody can use it.
They're in the special space.
Yeah, at any point. So one of the things we haven't touched on yet, and I know you already kind of said that you're happy for us to discuss this, but when we first met, the reason we started speaking, I reached out to you, was because you created Nook Pods, but also you are self-diagnosed with ADHD yourself. So, and as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, it would be really interesting to hear a little bit more about your journey
Yeah.
and, you know, your kind of journey and realization that you do have ADHD. And then a little bit about, you know, how that has really benefited you from creating your business and being an entrepreneur. Because we hear about neurodiversity traits being really well placed for entrepreneurialism, if that's a word, right? But
Yes. Is now.
Making it worse. But we never really hear from people that are entrepreneurs and also have ADHD. So yeah, over to you, David, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start right in the middle and say I couldn't have done it without it, frankly, now looking back, realizing, right? Because there's components in there that I now recognize are such an important part of my, you know, my quiver. Is that what you feel? You feel your quiver with bows, right? So it's such an important part of my quiver, just in terms of, you know, the strengths that it gives me in certain areas. But I'll tell you, there's two pieces to it that are really interesting. One is the strengths that it gives me, but two is the recognition and acknowledgement of it and the power that gives me. So the journey it's all really, really recent in terms of sort of realization and acknowledging and really diving into it and understanding it and using, say, for example, Professor Amanda Hearn, is it? Who's
Amanda 𝐬𝐲. Is it Amanda
𝐬𝐲? I beg your pardon, Amanda 𝐬𝐲. Amanda Hearn, someone else. Professor Amanda 𝐬𝐲, do IT Solutions. They have an app called ND Profiler, and it was in a couple of calls with her and getting, you know, sort of under the skin of neurodiversity pushed me to, you know, finally kind of go, I'm recognizing a lot of these things. I better go and do a check. And it came out very high on sort of ADHD, mild dyslexia, mild dyscalculia. But prior to that, so I do really see myself as a sort of a pre and a post that moment, because pre that moment, I look back and I kind of go, these are things that I actually berated myself about. I berated myself for my inadequacies because I, you know, found it very difficult in the world in certain ways. And I don't come across as an introvert. I'm clearly, you know, high extrovert in many ways, but I'm paralyzed when it comes to picking up the phone to make a phone call.
That's really interesting.
Totally and utterly. There's just this uncertainty about it and feeling of spotlight and judgment and all those things. And also walking into a room for networking, if I don't know anybody, I'll sit at the bar and hope that someone will say hello to me. And if there's something, and that's why it's also so important in a co-working and things like that, you know, to give people tools to help them, you know, connect with each other and get out from behind themselves. And it's also why it's really important too for organizations to recognize that with those different ND profiles, some of the most important things are said to you, not in the meeting, but just after the meeting. Because the ND brain, or particular, not all, of course, but some brains will be bubbling with things that they want to say, but they won't say it in that forum. And then they'll go, Emma, a quick word before we all disappear after the meeting, right? So my journey then came to that moment. And it started not quite with an ND sort of diagnosis, but a little bit earlier with something called whole brain thinking. And I highly recommend it. It's a really interesting field. And it basically, you know, you answer some questions about how you are in your normal state, how you are under duress, and it gives you two readings, almost like, I don't know what they're called. They're like a spider profile, but a footballer would have a profile of different strengths and weaknesses. So it gives you strengths and weaknesses in different areas, sort of, you know, under your normal conditions and under stressful conditions. And that was fascinating. I'd never seen anything, you know, give you a sort of, here you are normally, and here's where you run to when you're stressed. Okay, that's really interesting. And that uncovered, that divides the brain into quadrants of sort of creative focused, people focused, data focused, and planning, a planner. And you can be in all of those things, but I wasn't. I was all over in creative and people. With a little bit of data, okay, I mean, we need some data, and a little bit of planning. I mean, there has to be some sort of a plan, you know, that really does describe me. And then under my stress state, I went completely away from data and planning into relying on feelings and blue sky thinking. So that was one way that I kind of went, okay, other people think like this, and I need to meet those people. And I need to compliment myself with those people. So it helped me to recognize my strengths and weaknesses. I was always good at kind of going, I'm surround myself with people who love doing the things I hate and who are good at doing the things that I'm shit at.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, that was the sort of start. And then the ND, you know, once I realized about the ADHD and I dug into it a little bit more, that then helped me to appreciate, okay, I've got some real strengths that I need to acknowledge here and help to define the things that I'm great at. And now I really need to focus on filling in the blanks.
Yeah.
And that would be one of the things I would say, you know, another one of the things we were going to talk about was, you know, recommendations about freelancing or entrepreneurship. And I would say really a key component of that is flipping from, you know, taking your strengths and weaknesses and seeing your weaknesses as real drawbacks. They're just opportunities to fill gaps with other people. That's a
really good way to think about it. Yeah, I love that phrase, just to fill in the gaps in. And I think there's nothing, and I guess there's nothing wrong with that, is there either, you know? And that's
you can't do everything yourself, come on.
Exactly. And I think that's the reason we can say about freelance and entrepreneurialism, but also to businesses. It's like actually having a diverse team means you can have so much more scope to create innovative products, to kind of get your productivity up, and to just have a whole or a well-rounded thinking team. And you have those creatives and the enthusiasts and the people that are going to kind of bring the team along with their idea. And then you also have the people that can plan it and really make it happen. And I guess, you know, I don't speak for everybody, but I wonder whether some neurodiverse people or neurodivergent people that maybe have those gaps feel like they are passing work off to other people that they should be doing themselves. And I suppose it's moving away from thinking that you should just be doing it all.
Yes.
And actually using other people's skills to be doing, like you said, those gaps that you need to fill.
Yeah, and acknowledging too that people aren't what they are all the time. So you say an extrovert, you know, or the people who are going to carry the team the whole way along. But I'll be that person if the task is creative, right? I'll be fizzing and bubbling along with the creative element. But then we'll have a financial piece. I can't carry the team for that, right? So different people with different things that they're passionate about. And I've met people who, you know, when you're looking for those individual skills and you're looking to complement your gaps, you meet people who are really passionate about the things that you're terrible at or you know, really hate. And then they can really fly when they're given the reins on that. But then when they're having to do something creative, they're pulled down. So if we create these roles where people have to be jacks of all trades, then they're going to suck at parts of it, right? So if we can create roles that are more focused on where their strengths and passions are, and they're supported in the other bits, and that's the bit that you're talking about now, complementary teams, those are really powerful teams.
100%. And one of the things you mentioned there as well that kind of just wanted to go back to was that extrovert part of you. And so I think a lot of people think when they see someone that's such an extrovert and such an enthusiast, but would expect then if you go to a networking event, you be the one that kind of leads that and the one that's really comfortable going up to people. But it was really interesting that you say that actually at those things, that's probably where your anxiety peaks and where you might sit at the bar and kind of wait for people to come to you.
There's a massive barrier, and it happens in your gut and it happens in your brain, and it just paralyzes you, you know, to making that first overcoming that what you perceive as a potential humiliation, which is an extreme way to look at it. But, you know, it's not humiliating at all once you do it. It's like taking the plunge in the cold pool. You know, after you've done it, it's amazing. And you wonder, why weren't you doing it all along? But in actual fact, you know, there's a real trepidation about sticking your toe in that cold water. And you know that it's going to be a little bit painful and it's going to cause you to shudder. And so your body rejects it a little bit.
And I think there's an element of if it's structured. So when we talk about autism and autistic people, we always talk about kind of structured interaction and structured communication. But I don't necessarily think we touch on it very much with, or I haven't maybe touched on it very much with ADHD. But actually, it's really relevant. So if you're probably in a situation where people are coming to you and it's about Nook Pods or it's about something that you can lead the conversation because you're passing knowledge to a person.
Right.
It's probably much easier than you having to kind of go from an unstructured point from somebody that you don't know and start that conversation. But I guess once it gets to the point you're able to pass knowledge across, you become much more comfortable because you're in your comfort zone again.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it can be because the neurodiverse brain, in my experience, neurodivergent brain, I beg your pardon, in my experience, is more sensitive.
Yeah.
And so you're calculating, multiple things in advance before anything happens. With the result that you're probably also going, this person doesn't care. Why would they want to talk to me?
Yeah.
And you're probably over-calculating and you're making assumptions, and probably some negative assumptions because of some judgment about something or other. So you're already putting barriers up in front of yourself to protect yourself from those things. So if there are external structures, like for example, I went on a networking thing once, and you moved around from place to place, and there were board games. And they were all games that could be played in a few minutes, like some stickman, hangman type of things, and games I'd never played before. It was really interesting. But what you did was you sat down and you kind of figured out what on earth was going on with your, new introductee. And in the course of that, you had a little bit of a chat about each other, but you didn't start with nothing. You started with something. And we do a thing too where we put sort of conversation starters on the wall of the Nook. So you can look up and go, okay, so what are you working on? Or what is your passion? Or something like that. So it's not you. I can't be judged for saying that. It's here. It's on the wall.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea, and something I guess businesses, so not necessarily, having those around the wall in all businesses, but would be great when we move back to kind of the first point with meetings, that those are kind of conversation starters for meetings. And I guess if you have really clear agendas before meetings, you're able to make your notes and kind of where you might want to come in and how you might want to speak, and what questions you might want to ask beforehand. So you don't necessarily come out of that meeting having not said anything, feeling really anxious, and then feeling that, everyone else must have looked like a better performer than you. They're the ones that are going to get the promotion because they're the ones that have spoken up, but actually the ideas that you have.
Yeah, and there's different ways of doing it too. Sometimes it can be like, everyone gets a question, but one of the anxieties I have about that, and I acknowledge, I recognize, and I see other people doing it too, is that if there's a question coming to me, like everyone's going to do a 1-minute introduction. I'm not listening to anybody before me. All I hear is a raging torrent of my own blood in my ears. So, okay, it's an icebreaker, but there might be other icebreakers where I can write it down and throw it on a piece of paper and we can all have a look at it, rather than having to speak it out. And there could be, you get to talk about something that you really have some interest or passion about, or something to say on, or something like that. There are other ways, little things that you can do, like a way of breaking ice at the start of a meeting, and it depends on the meeting. This isn't all meetings, but if it's a sort of a workshop thing and you're going to be together for a few hours, give everybody a piece of paper with 3 circles on it and ask them all to draw something in the circles or something along those lines. And and they can just put nothing in and say it's the moon, or they can make it look like a well or a planet or whatever the hell. It doesn't matter. Drawing skills aren't really relevant. It's all fun. And again, that won't appeal to everybody, but if there's choice and different things, some people can do that and some people can do a different thing. We just need to get out of the one-size-fits-all mentality.
Yeah, and I guess that brings us really well back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning, and kind of as we close this up, that a lot of the things that you've said and that we kind of advocate is just choice. So, and just, I guess, that flexibility. And if you I think one of the things you said at the beginning, that you can only have choice if you have options. And I suppose it's, from our point of view, what we'd love employers to think more of is you have to kind of lead on those options. So you can talk to specialists in this space and industry experts to help think about what the options are going to be. But you as an employer have to be the ones that lead that accessibility conversation and lead the choices and lead the options. So your workforce has the option to thrive and bring out the best of those skills and work and identify where, who has the skills that person doesn't, and how you fill those gaps.
And use experts, or do it consultatively, because you're not an expert, right? You're not expected to be Mr. Mrs. Business leader, owner, whoever you are, right? So don't expect to do it on your own. Do it with your crew. Do it with your people. Because if they're involved in the process, then they have ownership of it. And don't put a ping pong table in the middle of the workspace where everyone can hear it, where it's going on. But by all means, have one, but put it in a room where people can go and close the door and let off steam. Some people let off steam by being together and doing something physical by playing football or ping pong or whatever. But other people might like to go into a room that has some ambient sounds and low light, or be able to control the light themselves.
Yeah.
Or some people like to be able to go to a quiet corner. Some people, a lot of people, really don't want to sit with their back to the open space. So
No.
make sure there's places where they can sit with their back to the wall. Does it all have to be hard floor that goes clop, 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 clop when everybody walks on it? Can we have some carpet? Could you use curtains? Have you got natural light? There's a lot, you know, what's your signage like? You know, there's a lot of things you can do that if I use a small example, if you make a website more visually accessible to somebody who is sight impaired, you'll create a website that's easier to navigate for everybody.
Yes.
So it's a kind of a policy of, if you design with extreme needs in mind, you end up with benefits for the mean. Design for the extreme, benefits the mean. It's proven. So if you take these things into consideration, you will end up with a workspace and HR policies and meeting policies and work from home policies that work better for everybody.
Love it. Thank you so much, David. It's been so lovely talking to you. And I think I've learned quite a lot, and I hope the people that kind of join us on the record when this goes out also learn a lot. We'll be able to, if anyone does get in touch with us after today and wants to find out more about Nook Pods, we can share details of that. But once again, thank you so much for sharing so candidly.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time and for doing what you do, and for bringing this conversation to the audience. And again, totally open and looking forward to connect with people. LinkedIn, nookpod.com, see you at an event. We're at all the workspace events and things like that too. So looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Emma.